Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get started. There'll probably be some more people joining, but that's okay. I unfortunately need to keep my camera off because it's a little overload with the screen share and I don't want to have any issues. So good afternoon, colleagues and friends. Thank you so much for your time today. Just a little bit of housekeeping. In the left-hand corner, there's a chat. If you have any questions, comments, or have tech issues, go ahead and throw those in the chat. If you want to interact with any of the participants, please do that. We're going to try to hold time for a Q&A session. If you could hold off on any questions until that time, but please put them in the chat if you want to remember them. That way we'll try to record them and ask them for you at the end if we have time, or allow you to do that as well. Please stay on mute until the Q&A. I've placed my name, email address, and phone number in the chat as well. So feel free to contact me after if you need any assistance or would like the materials, or to connect with anyone that will be speaking on this webinar today. Okay, so let's get started. Welcome to Agrivoltaics, solar energy paired with agricultural uses. I will probably use the term dual use a lot instead of agrivoltaics and co-location. I'll give a quick intro of myself. My name is Amy Berg Pickett. I'm based in Central Oregon, and the focus of my work is on utility scale solar development, and I'm a consultant in Western states. For the last 7 years, I've been working on projects, specifically in Oregon and Montana. The reason that I am interested in this topic is because I have a Bachelor of Science in Sustainability from OSU, and several of the projects that we will try to highlight today, I've been on the front end of. This webinar is a work product of the Solar Plus grant funded by the Washington Department of Commerce under a grant from the U.S. Department of Energy. The Solar Plus partners develop strategies to equitably grow solar in Oregon and Washington, and to promote the multiple benefits of solar energy, such as job creation, local resiliency, and today's topic, agrivoltaics. Spark Northwest is the sponsor of this webinar and has led the Solar Plus work on behalf of the Washington Department of Commerce since 2017. This is one of the last activities under this grant, but just the beginning for a conversation about agrivoltaics. Thank you, Spark Northwest, for this opportunity. I really appreciate it. I am joined today by Daniel Pope, the Communications and Development Director of Spark Northwest. Daniel, could you join and tell us a little more about Spark Northwest?
Yeah, thanks so much, Amy. Hi, everyone. I'm the guy you see in that photo talking with his hands. And Spark Northwest has been around since 2001, and we work with communities all over Oregon and Washington to try and build equitable access to clean energy. So we work with farmers, rural businesses, we work with low-income families and Black people of color and Indigenous communities all across the region to just help make it so that everyone can access the benefits of wind, solar, energy efficiency. And we're really thrilled to be a part of this conversation today because agrivoltaics is a really important topic in how farmers and rural businesses in particular can really benefit from using these new clean energies as they're becoming more available. So if you're at all interested in learning more about Spark Northwest, please visit Spark Northwest, all spelled out, .org, and you can learn a little bit more about the work we do there. Thanks so much, Amy.
Thank you, Daniel. And feel free to help me moderate if you feel we're going over time or something throughout the rest of the webinar. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to jump into the topic. I'm going to read for a minute and then we'll get into some interesting conversations with some experts today. So The purpose of the webinar is to introduce the concept with interesting case studies to provide a status update of agrivoltaics, to give us food for thought on designing agrivoltaic systems and how this ties into existing and new policy to encourage and enhance agrivoltaic projects in Oregon, Washington, and other states. An added benefit is that we can network and share ideas. This is a big topic, and I will only highlight what we have time for. Currently, there's some discussion and negative press coverage around solar energy as a conflicting use of the land when sited near or on agricultural land. I want to assist in showing that the uses are compatible. We all utilize electricity to power our lives. We are accustomed to viewing existing power lines, substations, and large generation facilities. We may not even notice these features in our day-to-day activities. I witnessed acceptance of the existing infrastructure in the view shed during public meetings and community engagement activities in relation to permitting solar projects. Yet at the same time hear extensive complaints and concerns of the proposed siting of solar in the adjacent area on agricultural land. Photovoltaic power generation facilities are new for some of the US population, especially in rural areas. The push for renewables to meet the demand of clean energy via state goals and mandates, federal incentives, and customer preference is alarming to some people, especially in states with very little solar to date. And understandably so. We all are scared of change, and we love our pastoral views, and we do honor the importance of agricultural land. Ideally, projects can be sited on land that has already been permanently disturbed by humans, like farmland. Siting projects on undisturbed land can often impact important wildlife habitat. We find ourselves trying to balance the values of clean energy, wildlife conservation, and sustainable use of agricultural lands. Implementing dual-use agriculture practices into the solar facilities is an excellent way to alleviate the pressure and perception that solar projects are a competing use of the land. The goal of the webinar today is to highlight that farming, ranching, and solar energy production can be a complementary use of the land, especially if policies are adjusted or created to allow for farming and energy to coexist by designing projects in advance that benefit the farming activity and the energy production. A great example of a policy consideration is the solar farm in the photo. This is a project in Oregon that I worked on. If policy allowed for a site like this to be designed to meet the needs of farming within the panels, it would look very different with more space between the rows. Okay, I'm going to quickly run through the topics that we're going to talk about, and then I will, after this, I will be start inviting guests to the conversation. So we're going to discuss pollinator habitat creation, apiaries, grazing within the panels, crops, seed production, and food crops, the benefits of co-locating projects. It provides income diversification for landowners and farmers. It's a sustainable development practice, habitat restoration, agricultural products, utilized as a carbon sink, water conservation, improved soil quality, sediment and erosion control, increased biodiversity, community benefits to adjacent farm operations, and the generation of clean energy. I have an example here that was provided to me by Rob Davis. Rob, do you want to speak for a couple minutes?
Sure, happy to, and congratulations on such a good audience and such an important and timely topic. So this is a photo of a pollinator-friendly solar array. There's a couple thousand acres of projects like this in Minnesota. This particular project is near Downsville, Wisconsin, and it's about a 2 or 3 megawatt DC project on around 15 acres or so. And just outside the fence, there's a family of Amish farmers that are using all of the ecosystem services, all of the increased abundance of pollinators to benefit the pollinator-dependent crops. So every single one of those tomatoes has to be visited, the tomato flowers has to be visited a few times. Same for watermelon and a wide variety of other crops. So the way that we think about solar, we can find compatible uses that aren't just inside the fence, but are also just outside the fence. And so I'd really highlight, particularly for communities in the Northwest that, have such leadership nationwide in specialty crop production, from red raspberries to pears to, orchard tree fruit and other things, to really think about the opportunities for what grows under and around the solar panels inside the fence to meaningfully benefit the crops growing adjacent to and outside the fence.
Do you want to quickly talk about your scorecard here?
Yeah. So Fresh Energy is a nonprofit policy organization that advances best practices for dual use solar. A shortcut to our website is just beeslovesolar.org. I'll put that in the chat shortly, beeslovesolar.org. But for practitioners that are looking to have a policy mechanism to establish pollinator-friendly ground cover within the managed context of a solar farm, there's a simple policy tool that's been embraced by a dozen or 14 states or so called a pollinator-friendly solar scorecard. And so it is the representation of something that is a incremental change, a small change to the seed mix of inside the solar array fence to provide a meaningful benefit. So there's really great opportunities, but also we have to also think about first and foremost the energy generation of the operating constraints of the solar facility. So we don't want tall, 6 foot tall blooming plants. We want to find ways to make an incremental change to the seed mix inside the array area in order to provide benefits to soil and crops outside, well, both inside and outside the array area. So that's just a call to pollinator-friendly solar scorecard. And so for energy buyers, whether they are in corporations or counties or governments, they can use the pollinator-friendly solar scorecard and put it right into their procurement. They can just ask that projects provide scorecards and then rank them not just on the competitiveness of the price, but also on the quality of the vegetation inside and around the project.
I really appreciate that. Okay, I'm going to move to the next slide. Okay, some quick findings regarding planting native grasses and forbs compared to the pre-existing land use. There's a 95% increase in soil quality and 3 times increase in the quantity of pollinators, bees shown on the site. Next slide. The creation of pollinator habitat and seed production. I would like to invite Sean Pryor from Understory Consulting on. Are you there, Sean?
Yeah, I am.
Okay, please take a couple to 3 minutes or so talking about the projects you've been involved in and what you're currently working on.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Amy, for the opportunity to speak with everyone today. Yeah, like Amy said, my name is Sean. I'm an ecologist at Understory Consulting, also at our sister nonprofit organization called the Understory Initiative. And we're based out of Medford, Oregon, which is in Southwest Oregon. We primarily are interested in restoring native plant communities and habitat for pollinating insects. And we were approached a few years ago to start seeding select solar farms in Oregon with native plants for the benefit of pollinating insects. And so we started doing that, I believe, in 2018. And we've had, so we've done, we've seeded about 6 sites right now with a few that we're still intensively managing for pollinator habitat. The goal here is to essentially locate these sites in areas where there's surrounding agriculture that would benefit from pollinating insects from having a source nearby. So these solar farms become a source of pollinating insects for surrounding farmland communities. And so we seed native wildflower mixes along with native bunchgrass mixes, which will, in the long run, lead to soil conditions that are improved beyond where they were at when we took over, and will hopefully have long-lasting effects on not just pollinator communities in the short term, but also just the plant communities in general and the soil condition in general for the long term. And I just wanted to echo what Amy was saying about the alternatives that we've seen really are to locate these sites on in wildland areas that have intact wildlife habitat currently, as opposed to using up farmland for this work. And we feel, and from what we've seen, there's a lot less disturbance when these sites are located on farmland, and there are benefits to the surrounding agricultural communities, as well as the opportunity to actually grow plants on site. And so we feel that this has been a win-win, and we really have found it preferable to the times when we've seeded in areas that were located on wildland areas that had to be heavily disturbed. So just want to echo what Amy said and really support the movement that toward doing these types of co-located agricultural activities on solar sites.
Thank you, Sean. Can you put your contact information or your website in the chat for people so they can talk to you further about this topic?
Yeah, absolutely. I noticed that you put seed production in the title too. It's something that we, I could just touch on that really quickly if there's time. It's something that we have explored on a number of sites, actually agriculturally growing native species for their seed so that we could actually spread that seed to other sites. And it hasn't been something that we've fully realized yet at any particular site, although at the site that's pictured here, we do annually go out and just hand harvest seed there so that we could spread to more sites. But it does seem to me that there is an economically viable model that would work to produce native seed on solar farms that could then be used on other solar sites. So I think that there is a model there that, and we plan on pursuing that at some point, just haven't yet.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Sean.
Yep, thank you, Amy.
Okay, the next case study is concerning apiaries, and this is regarding a project in Southern Oregon. And I would like to invite John Jacobs of Old Soul Bees and Apiaries and the president of Oregon State Beekeepers Association to speak to us for 2 to 3 minutes on what he's working on and what he's noticed, what his current thinking is about this dual use. Go ahead, John. Thank you.
Well, thanks for the opportunity. I can't seem to get my camera working, but should be good nonetheless. I've been a commercial beekeeper for 24 years, and it's a challenging occupation. And one of the biggest challenges we face are habitat loss. So I kind of saw a natural alignment between utility scale solar and creating pollinator habitat. These are long-term projects in the neighborhood of 30 years, and it's a great opportunity to have some ground dedicated to benefiting pollinators. Here at this the site, the Eagle Point site in the photo we've had bees there now for I think 3 years, and it's definitely one of our most productive apiaries. We're currently on 4 other utility scale solar sites in Oregon and about to be on 3 more in California, hopefully within the next year.
John, can you talk about the collaboration between you and Caldera?
Oh yeah, well the honey we produce at these sites is strongly perceived as a, I think Rob Davis likes to use the term a hero ingredient. And not with just Caldera, but several other breweries, we've supplied them with honey to do a collaborative project to use the solar honey, as we call it sometimes, in the brewing process. And it's a great public relations tool, and it's a nice way to create a value-added product. People seem to just love the concept and love supporting pollinators, so it's a way that they can help save the bees by having another beverage.
Thank you. Can you talk about how you're thinking about cover crops as an addition to maybe the opportunity of planting natives on site?
Yeah, there are some studies that have shown that, as a biologist, one of the things that we care about is a concept called carrying capacity. And so for a given patch of ground, we are always interested in maximizing pollinator benefit. And some of these studies that I've seen have shown that traditional cover crops are able to support more pollinators, even native species of pollinators. And so for a lot of our clients, I recommend going with more traditional cover crops because they're very affordable and easy to maintain, and actually will make more honey, which is important to beekeepers.
Okay, thank you. And I have a note on that topic as well. So one of the projects I worked on in the Willamette Valley, the existing cover crop was clover for seed production. And I think that would have been an ideal site to be an apiary because it already had that cover crop that maybe could have just been enhanced. Okay, thank you so much, John. Can you put your information in the chat, or we can provide it for you so people
Sure.
can find you? Thank you very much. Okay, I'm going to move on to grazing. Okay, grazing. So livestock on a solar farm utilized to assist with the maintenance of the vegetation. The benefit for the sheep is shelter during the summer and against storms like rain. And OSU has conducted a study that shows that it may improve animal welfare to conduct the dual use project, and that there was an increased 200% in land carrying capacity with the sheep paired with grazing under the panels. Now, I have invited Trent Hendricks of Cabreijo Ranch to call in, and I just wanted to mention, if you guys can find him on LinkedIn, his postings are really exciting. Trent, are you on the line? Okay, it looks like he may not have been able to join us. So I'm going to move on to a case study in Oregon. This is an actual sheep grazing operation paired with a solar farm. And it is 17 acres of utility scale solar generating about 3 megawatts AC of power. It's been operational since 2018. I checked in with the landowner this weekend because he's my friend, and he's very happy with being able to diversify his income and also to utilize the solar farm for the shelter benefits of his sheep operation. And so he is so happy, and he gets to perform any of the maintenance on site that the sheep can't take care of. Like, they don't prefer the grass in the fall when it's kind of dry, so he does need to go in there and maintain that. But he's really happy, and so it's a really nice project. Okay, I'm going to move to the next speaker, which I'm very pleased to introduce. So this case study will be about an Oregon community solar project paired with agrivoltaic research. And that is a partnership between Oregon State University College of Agricultural Sciences and Dan Orzek, the general manager of Oregon Clean Power Cooperative, And I'll just say, Dan's taught me everything I know about solar development. So thank you, Dan, and I'll let you go ahead and take the line here.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Can people hear me?
Yes.
Oh, great. Okay. Sorry. So, yeah, I'm having technical difficulties and I'm only able to be on the phone. But Amy, if you just want to tell me what slide people are seeing,
Yep.
I can, or
Yep.
seeing, I can speak to that.
Great. So I am showing your slide about with your like array footprint. And if you could talk about how thinking about design in advance of combining the dual use would be really helpful.
Yeah, sorry, is this the aerial? Which,
Yes. No,
okay.
it's the
Yeah.
actual, yeah, it's the aerial of your footprint with the panels.
Okay, great. So first, let me explain that we are a member-owned co-op, so we're not a rural electric co-op. We're actually a co-op like REI or an ag co-op that does community solar projects in Oregon. And so as a community organization, we've been looking for ways to triple bottom line, if you will, benefit not just financially, but in other respects as well. So as Amy mentioned, we partnered with Oregon State University to do the solar piece, and they are doing the research piece. So this is actually, will be a live community solar project, meaning people will be able to subscribe to the power, and a purpose-built research project for agrivoltaics. So the OSU has been doing research, I think Amy mentioned that, and has some really interesting outcomes, but it's all been on existing solar farms on and around the OSU campus. So what we wanted to do was build them a solar farm where they could actually do apples to apples comparison of crops in and around the solar panels and then in open control areas next door. So I think what you're seeing is you're seeing two types of solar arrays there, fixed facing south, and then trackers, east-west trackers, single axis, and then kind of intermixed are open areas that are the control areas.
Thanks, Dan.
Yeah.
Can you talk about the biomass study, the slide that you have that shows plant efficiency?
Yeah, so the early research, or the initial research at OSU was on their existing solar farms, and so you heard about the sheep farm that we have in Oregon. So at OSU, they studied what they call lamb happiness. So they put sheep, lambs in an existing solar array and measured various variables. And so what they found, among other things, was that the soil moisture content under the solar panels was higher. And that's not surprising, right? It's, partially shaded. And as a result of that, there's more biomass in that area. And the soil stayed moisture later into the season. So there's a time shift that was important too. The lambs in those areas, again, not surprisingly, in the heat of the summer, they prefer to be under the solar panels in the shade. And then the variables that they measured that as a group they called lamb happiness were things like cortisol levels in the wool, weight, and so on. And they found, I believe, that the lambs in the solar panel research condition, did better than if they were just out in the open field.
Okay, thank you. And then I have your slide, major global and national impacts. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, that's really Professor Higgins' area. So I can
Okay.
just tell you that he's done some research, and what he's found is basically there's a huge potential just using existing farmland. In fact, I don't know if it's on that slide, but I think they found that so lettuce, does really well. At least some brands of lettuce do really well in solar panels because it doesn't do well in the open sun in the middle of the summer in a lot of places. And what they found is if you just take the areas in lettuce production in the U.S. And convert them to agrivoltaics, to dual use, you could power the whole country.
Great. Okay, anything else about this upcoming project, Dan?
Maybe I'll just add, so we tried to look at it from a commercial point of view, meaning there are lots of different approaches to configurations to solar panels for agrivoltaics. Some of them are really expensive, and not all are really viable from our point of view if you're trying to do something that's commercially viable. So we took what seemed to be the most standard approaches, which are absolutely standard height trackers, spaced a little further apart than usual, so you can drive a tractor between them, and then elevated fixed solar panels, so 8 feet at the bottom, so you can work at the lowest edge, so you can work underneath them. So we'll see what the results are.
Thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm gonna move on to one other piece of research that has come out of OSU, and that is that PV efficiency can also be improved by siting on lands that benefit agricultural crops as well, due to really the climate on site. So that's interesting, and I'll make sure that that study is cited correctly at the end of the presentation. And I will be sending out the presentation to everyone that registered, and we are going to try to make the video or audio content as available as well. Okay, now I'm going to try to bring Trent back on. He is on the line and was unable to mute himself, so just give me 1 second. Hi, Trent.
Hello.
Great. Okay, thank you. So, Trent, could you tell us a brief introduction of yourself and your business plan with the sheep grazing, and then anything else you'd like to say about that? Thank you very much for joining us today. I know you're traveling.
Absolutely. So my name is Trent Hendricks, and I'm the managing partner of Cabreijo Ranch. It's a family ranch based in the Missouri Ozarks, and we do a number of different things. We're heavily involved in the sheep and lamb industry, and a big part of our business that's growing rapidly is managing the land under solar panels. And we're doing that across quite a few states here in the Midwest and the South, and working primarily with utility scale properties. And we bring a kind of a different approach. It's not just sheep plus solar. We also are working at regenerating the land under the solar through particular grazing management methods, so that we are hopefully building carbon, we're sequestering carbon, we're achieving a lot of the environmental outcomes that are desirable to have a positive impact for future generations, while at the same time ensuring that there's maximum collection of sunshine for the solar field, as well as through photosynthesis for feed for our sheep. So we kind of view it as the trifecta, really, where we're really checking all the boxes and keeping land in food production. And with all the flat surfaces on the technical assets on the solar farm, there is an inevitable amount of water impact that can happen. And getting land really healthy, opening the land up, getting the organic matter higher, and just all the attributes that we can get through a planned grazing system, we actually are minimizing, if not actually mitigating, minor erosion on these sites. So we actually are providing a long-term value and minimizing the civil work necessary. We are also using a couple of different systems to verify and validate that the land is actually regenerating. We're using the Savory Institute's ecological outcome verification system, as well as a few satellite-based technologies to get both sides of the equation. And we can actually verify that the land is regenerating, and obviously it's producing electricity and it's producing human food. So it's a pretty exciting opportunity, and it's also a great way to kind of not just co-locate from a land use perspective, but also to increase value for farmers, ranchers, people that may not have the assets for a capital intensive industry to be able to bring in and say, hey, use your skill sets to manage the land under solar. There's usually fees attached to that that help offset the costs of operations. And so it really is an exciting opportunity at the nexus of energy and food and environment.
Thank you. That's wonderful. I will make sure that your contact information, your website, and maybe your email is available in the final presentation. So thank you very much, Trent.
Thanks.
Okay, I have a couple more notes to go through, and then we can move to Q&A. Okay, so this brings us to design considerations of the projects and kind of a policy wish list. So enacting policy for streamlining the process, maybe permitting, would be very helpful, and that would encourage the opportunity to design and operate a sustainable agrivoltaic system. I think policy that would remove arbitrary limitations would be helpful. Prioritizing education on PV infrastructure as a key element of a farm operation. So kind of changing our worldview on what solar is, that it's more important and integral to, you know, our world going forward. A policy wish list also would include the Pollinator scorecard and agrivoltaic siting incentives. Project development and the actual construction is very expensive, a big, heavy financial burden up front, and not every project can support, you know, everything like pollinator habitat or dual use. So thinking about what the project economics are and what can actually be supported or maybe subsidized by the project, in a sense, like if you're doing some land restoration, then maybe instead of just reseeding with something that would be like typical turf grass or something like that, you could instead incorporate something that the project could afford. So I just want to make it clear that we can have all these ideals and move toward this, but we also have to take into consideration that solar energy and developers can't fix all of the world's problems. But this is a very interesting topic, and we're seeing states and countries utilize agrivoltaic systems, and I think that we should push Oregon and Washington and other states pretty hard to move towards incorporating this more. And here is the contact information for Spark Northwest and myself that will be provided to you all. And I am going to stop. I'll just leave the slide presentation here, but I'm going to start a Q&A session, and I want to make sure that we're not stepping on top of each other. So maybe if you would like to just quickly say that you'd like to ask a question in the chat, then I'll call on you and keep it a little bit moderated. And please feel free to ask questions of any of the experts that I have on the call here today. Okay, Kat, please fire away, and thank you so much. Please ask us some hard questions.
Well, I represent a lot of developers in my consulting firm, and I'm just wondering if you have any list of advantages or tips that we could use to get them on board for this, you know, added benefit.
Are you talking to the participants, anyone in particular, or is that a general question?
Kind of just a general question.
I think there are information. There is information. I'm not sure if it's compiled together. Rob, or does anyone on the line have any comments on this?
I can speak briefly to our experience installing pollinator habitat if it's helpful.
That'd be great, Sean. Thank you.
Yeah, so our like I said earlier, we've only been doing this for about 3 years, and so the results so far are encouraging in terms of increasing pollinator abundance. But in terms of costs and sort of ways to sell this to developers, our goal is to get costs down. We're experimenting with new techniques to get installation costs down. Currently, the costs come in the form of site preparation and seed that may not be associated with more traditional methods of revegetating or doing vegetation management. However, we are experimenting with new techniques to bring down those costs. John talked about using potentially non-native species where that's appropriate. If we're going to be doing long-lasting sort of habitat creation, we like to use native species that are expensive, but there are options there. And then really the benefit comes in the form of long-term management, at least in the Western US. And I think folks have been successful with this elsewhere, but establishing the type of vegetation that we prefer to establish, it's typically short and doesn't require much mowing. So maybe one round of mowing a year plus maybe a little bit of spot spraying. And that's the goal. And that would bring the cost down for vegetation management in the long run substantially. So beyond that, I would hope that there are future tax incentives or regulatory incentives that would further encourage folks to do this. But that's really the vegetation management in the long run is where we're hoping the savings are realized.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Okay.
Sean. John, did you have a comment to add on to that? Is that what you meant in the chat?
Yes, I do. One advantage that I see quite regularly for utility scale solar companies is just on the land use perspective alone. Many of the projects I've worked on, to be able to gain access to agricultural lands, many municipalities insist that the land be kept in farm use. So, we offer them a model that they can use to do that. So it really helps with getting projects approved. It helps build community support. Like Amy mentioned earlier, a lot of people don't like change, and there is a somewhat irrational fear that we are taking all this land out of farm use, when in reality it's quite the opposite. We make farms more sustainable and more economically viable.
I agree on that one. I actually when townships ask me these questions, I recommend that they have pollinator in their solar ordinance. But some of these others where you've got, you have not as dense coverage, so that you can have the animals grazing underneath. I was just trying to think of other ways that I could get the developers excited about this. One thing I do want to throw out, you probably don't have it out west, but in the Midwest where I live, we have the Bee and Butterfly Habitat Fund that is a nonprofit that will actually do the seeding. So that's a big sell for the developers. I don't know if you have anything like that out in the Northwest.
We do work with those guys quite a bit. I love those guys.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, thanks so much, guys. Appreciate the answers.
Thank you. I'm going to move on to a couple more questions. So I have a question for Trent in the chat, and let me unmute him. Do you have any experience monitoring and documenting carbon sequestration on your regenerative sheep graze sites?
That's a difficult question to answer.
Oh, sorry about that, Trent. Go ahead.
Yeah, carbon is a little bit contentious in that depending on which methods of reading the data can have variable results. So we're looking more at a suite of econometrics that more broadly captures improvements in more irrefutable ways. So yes, we are doing a lot of that stuff. We use both leading and lagging indicators, short-term monitoring, things that look at plant density, water infiltration, species composition, biodiversity, et cetera, and then long-term or lagging indicators such as organic matter, which carbon does play into that. But again, if you get 10 people that are experts on carbon, you'll have at least 20 different versions on what the right way to do things are. So we try to stay back from that which can be argued and really focus on what is irrefutable. And we also capture other metrics such as pounds of land produced per acre, which then our clients can compare with their amount of electricity sold off of the similar project, and really be able to demonstrate that, you know, we are achieving value and improvement in all these variable areas, kind of creating a whole suite or basket of positive outcomes.
Great, thank you. Okay, I'm going to move on to a question from Eric Noble, Planning Director of Klamath County. What type of irrigation systems are generally used under solar panels? And I would think this would maybe be a question for Sean or maybe Dan Orzik.
Yeah, I mean, in most of our projects, we're not utilizing irrigation, so I might pass this off to someone else. Although we did look into that for a couple different sites, and but never officially settled on anything. So, and didn't install it. So I might pass that off.
I think that Dan's project may very well be studying types of irrigation in their research. Is that correct, Dan? Okay, there you go.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no, I would echo that. We're not, most projects are not irrigated that I know of. We're not planning on doing that. What we are doing, what OSU is doing, is actually burying quite expensive soil moisture sensors to look at the levels of soil moisture. And, you know, they do have, as I mentioned, they have some research already showing that, not surprisingly, in the shade, the soil stays moisture, and therefore requires less irrigation.
Great, thanks, Dan. Okay, I'm going to move on to a few more questions if we have time. From Dugan Marib, who actually wrote a beautiful dual-use paper for Renewable Northwest, which I hope they'll be sharing soon, has asked a question. What arguments, education points work best when trying to convince county officials or state land agencies of these benefits? There has been a lot of frustration over dual use not being accepted as a replacement for farming the parcel. I echo that frustration. I don't know, does anyone have any comments on beneficial arguments or talking points to get policy and decision makers on board?
I could take a little swing at that. One thing that I find that sells very well is food never goes out of style, and you know, pollinators are the linchpin in our food production system, and there's a pretty robust Save the Bees movement out there that it usually garners a lot of public support. So I would like to say it's an easy sell, but it's not. But it is a strong argument for utilizing these solar sites for additional benefits to our farming system.
Thank you, John.
Hey, Amy,
And
this is Daniel with Spark Northwest, and I just
Thanks,
wanted to
Daniel.
also add, you know, this isn't really about utility scale solar, but we work with a lot of farmers and small rural businesses on installing solar on their properties. And a common thing that I've heard from farmers is that most farmers have their least productive 10 acres that make for a really good site for solar. And you know, in addition, there's funding opportunities that are available through USDA. But I also just wanted to mention that, you know, for a lot of farmers being able to say, you know, we have diversified our income streams on our property or have cut down on our electrical usage is a pretty strong argument, just because I think a lot of people understand that a lot of farmers and rural businesses are really operating on pretty thin margins. And so any kind of efficiency measures they can implement or producing clean energy on site is going to really dramatically impact their bottom line. And so we often keep our conversation, even though, you know, we're an environmental organization, we keep it very financial in terms of, you know, what the benefits are for farmers and rural businesses.
Thank you, Daniel. And I guess I should say also that this webinar should definitely not just be about utility scale. That's just my obsession. So just want to make sure that we are accounting for all on-site use. And we'll keep moving through a few more questions. And if we don't get to them all, I'll try to follow up to the group or the person that asked the question. So I have a question. If you add PV, does that change the use or does it reduce permitting? And from my experience in permitting projects, at least in Oregon, it does not change the use. You're welcome to add ag use as you can farm your land anytime in Oregon, and you're welcome to use it on your solar project, but getting any benefit like having more space to operate your equipment or designing the project to make it efficient for both uses is not something that is incentivized or even really allowed. It's very complex. Oregon did pass a dual use kind of incentive, but it's going to expire this coming year. And I don't think any county has been able to utilize that ordinance that was passed at the Department of Land Conservation and Development. Okay, I'm going to move to another question. Are there any studies documenting the relative cost savings associated with pollinator seeding, particularly in the Southeast US where grass grows fast? This might be a good question for Rob.
Was that a question about the Southeast US?
South, let's see. All right, guys, I lost it.
Yeah, I mean, I think the key question is to really challenge the engineering team and the civil and environmental teams to say, how can we do better than turf? And in most states, you already have a Clean Water Act obligation to establish perennial vegetation in order to be able to close out your stormwater permit. So in most states, again, in most regions, you already have an obligation, the solar developer, I should say, already has an obligation to close out a stormwater permit. What more and more research is showing is that that can be done with and provides significant system benefits as well as pollinator benefits by using a diverse mix of plants. I've taken calls from large power companies in the Southeast complaining about the intensity of droughts and heat and how that really is harmful to and really just kills a lot of shallow rooted turf grass. So in a day and age where we're going to have more and more days of intense heat and drought as well as intense storms, we need to be thinking about high performance vegetation under and around solar panels. And generally those are native plants or naturalized plants. But in general, we know just about everywhere we can do better than just bare ground or turf grass in situations where there is arable soil. Completely understand that there are lots of places where we'd love to build solar where almost nothing can grow. And that's, old parking lots, gravel pits, previously disturbed lands in the desert where there's no vegetation. Lots of places to build solar there. But when there's an opportunity to do better than bare ground or turf grass, there's a growing body of evidence showing that provides meaningful benefits to the system.
Thank you, Rob. Okay, so Rachel asked a question about cab systems and what sort of electrical design choices are important for dual use. So I think this could be a little hard for us on this call because I'm not sure that we have that many engineers on the site, but yeah, I agree. Cab system is very awkward to get around and to move vehicles and equipment for operations and maintenance. And then it's expensive to use different types of systems instead of cab, like direct bury or trays or something. Direct bury could cause issues. Does anyone have a comment on that? Maybe Sean, can you talk about the difficulties or the things that we thought about when working on the Merrill site and the systems and the maintenance?
Yeah, I echo the concerns about the cab wiring systems. That has been our biggest challenge if we have to drive a tractor or a seeder or some sort of larger piece of equipment. That has been our largest challenge by far. Everything else we can pretty much work around. Having a little bit more space between rows is nice if we need to pull a larger seeder, but we can typically get in with like a side-by-side and a seeder with pretty much any setup. So aside from that, we typically also apply a pre-emergent herbicide directly around like electrical boxes and things where electrical workers need to get in consistently. So we'll apply something that just doesn't allow our seed mix to grow right around those boxes, because otherwise mowing right around conduit and things like that just always feels a little dicey. But I don't know that that's really a design issue that you can completely get around. So we've been able to deal just fine with all the different mounting systems and things that we've had to work around with our seeders and mowers and things like that. So it's really just the cab wiring has been that's almost to the point where it like doubles or triples the cost of labor if you have that. It's just really not very friendly to our operation.
Okay, that's great. And I think if we have the opportunity to start thinking about designing these projects up front so that we can maximize dual use, trying to site the project in a way that those systems are all as closely together as possible, the cab system and maybe the roads and the inverters and transformers and stuff, and then figure out a way to manage the vegetation or whatever around that area differently than the dual use on the remaining sites. So that's definitely something that needs to be worked on. And then I don't have time for any more questions, but I want to thank everyone for their time today. I really appreciate it. And just let me know if you need more information or you want to connect with any of the people that spoke today. I think I have one or two more questions that I was not able to get to. One of them's a little technical, and I am going to follow up on that. So thank you all very much and have a beautiful rest of your week. Get out there and get some sunshine.